happy hump day to all of you. And thank you for logging into this webinar, Gaining the Dyslexic Advantage Through a Growth Mindset. Okay, so let me just introduce myself very quickly. So I am June, and I've been in this company for 18 years. And I always tell people that, the amount of years I've been here is as old as the whole SEN support system in Singapore. So I started out at a time when the SEN officers are just inserted into the mainstream school system. And I have been working with them since 18 years ago. So we have been training them. They've been coming to us for dyslexia training support, and yeah, so it's a continuous relationship with our SEN officers. Okay, other than SEN officers, I work very closely with parents of our students as well. DAS has 3,500 students in our 14 learning centers, and the parents of these children, they can attend training with us. They come to us for our weekly workshops as well as certificates, or for some of them, they even pursue the master's program. Yeah, so several of our parents actually went up all the way to the master's program, and then they realized that this is something that they would like to do as a career, and that's how they continue along this path, because they have supported their children through dyslexia and ADHD and the other SENs. They feel that they can do the same for the other children. And yeah, so some have found like a new love, a new career with us. Okay, yeah, so as I'm sharing with you, I will be sharing with you my practical experiences as well as my personal experiences. So in my personal life, I have 3 children. 2 of them are school going, so they have ADHD. And of course, yeah, so I will bring in, experiences as a parent, as an educator, so that you can benefit. So I know that I think the audience is a mix of parents and educators. So at any time, feel free to chat. You can use the chat function, and I have colleagues who are with me, so they can answer your questions if I can't multitask. Okay, all right. So as for the slides, we'll send it to you after the webinar. All right. Okay, so let's look at, it's a very short webinar. I hope to end by 12:45, and then we can have a short time of Q&A. Okay, so today I'll just be covering what dyslexia is. And I'm sure all of you all know already, so it's really done briefly. And I'm going to talk about the dyslexic advantage. Okay, and then we'll look at how to gain this dyslexic advantage, and then finally we'll look at what the role of parents and educators in developing the growth mindset that gives you this dyslexic advantage. Okay, so let's start with dyslexia. I'm sure you have at any time or other Googled this term dyslexia. And the website would have given you symptoms like reading, spelling, writing difficulties, right? But perhaps less so the cause of dyslexia, because it's a little bit more technical. But I do want to spend a bit of time on the cause of dyslexia, because it's important that we understand the cause so that we can remediate the problem. Okay, so dyslexia, I often tell parents that I see that, okay, you might hear of this term phonological awareness, and it can sound a little bit daunting, but in effect, it just really means sound awareness. So dyslexia is a difficulty with sound awareness. Dyslexics are not so sensitive to the sounds of the English language. So just like how some people are tone deaf in music, dyslexia is being tone deaf in the sounds of the English language. All right. Yeah, so this is how I explain dyslexia to parents and even to children themselves, because I think it's important that they also understand what causes this difficulty in reading, spelling, and writing. So really a simple way, a simple analogy is to say, you know how some people sing out of tune? Yeah, and they're not very sensitive to the notes of the music. In the same way, dyslexics are just not so sensitive to the sound of the English language. All right. Okay, so dyslexia is caused by difficulties in sound awareness, as well as sound memory and rapid naming speed. Okay, so these are the three components that dyslexics tend to show deficits in. Okay, sound memory means sometimes when you give a new name, a name that they haven't heard before, and then you ask them to repeat, they have difficulty repeating because they can't store the sounds in their head that well. Okay, so that's a difficulty with sound memory, or we say phonological memory. And then there is the rapid naming speed as well. Dyslexics are shown to have slower rapid naming speed. So let's say I give you a piece of worksheet with many objects on it, and I ask you to name it. You know the words, but different people take different time to retrieve those words, those vocabulary, and dyslexics tend to retrieve it slower than others. So that's the rapid naming deficit that we are talking about. Okay, so logically, when you look at a word that you actually know, retrieving it is actually hard for them as well. They just take longer to retrieve, whether it's a word, a picture, or anything like a Chinese character. Okay, yeah. All right, so these are the three main core deficits that dyslexics will face. All right, sound awareness deficit, sound memory difficulties, as well as slower rapid naming speed. So I think we all know that dyslexia primarily affects, reading, spelling, and writing. And dyslexia is found in about 4 to 10% of a population. MOE reported recently that in a Sec 1 cohort, 4.5% of Sec 1 students are found to be diagnosed with dyslexia. So that's the stats from our local schools. Okay, so it's consistent with the national stats. With the international statistics. Yeah. So as dyslexia is the most common special educational need in Singapore mainstream schools, followed by ADHD and autism. Okay, so many of the children that SEN officers support, majority of them have dyslexia, and that's why dyslexia is the most well supported SEN in Singapore. Okay, so but other than this literacy difficulties that dyslexics face, that's only the tip of the iceberg. So if you look at the image here, the iceberg is actually very huge. And whatever that we are seeing on top, the reading, spelling, and writing difficulties, that's only the tip. Okay, dyslexics also have difficulties with working memory, slower processing speed, difficulties maintaining attention, coordinating their motor movements, as well as emotional and behavioral issues. Okay, so there was a study done in 2015 by our local psychologists. They found that children with dyslexia experience more than just educational issues. They show emotional and social difficulties as well. And many times it's because dyslexia is a hidden difficulty. Not many people see their outward struggle. Only people who are very close to them. So as a result, these children, they feel frustrated with school, with social situations, because their difficulty is not very apparent, and people don't understand, underneath all this facade, they are actually struggling, and they are actually working very, very, very hard to achieve this grade. Maybe it's not even a passing grade, but they have tried so hard. Yeah, so and because of all this frustration, all this effort that nobody sees, and all the struggles on their own, especially if it's not diagnosed, they in the end, I think that results in a lot of baggage, emotional, social, behavioral baggage. Yeah, and of course they have expectations to meet as well, especially if their cognitive level is either average or above average. They do have expectations of themselves, but yet they're struggling in school. So I think the discrepancy causes them to develop self-doubt. Yeah. And it can spiral into bigger things such as anxiety and depression if unsupported. Okay, so we say that dyslexia is a hidden disability because not many people see their struggles and outwardly they look fine, right? So I like the analogy, like a balloon with a tiny, almost unnoticeable hole. Despite blowing doubly hard to inflate this balloon, it never really reaches its full potential because of the air that escapes through the tiny hole. All right, so I think like the balloon with a tiny unnoticeable hole, it is very hard for children with dyslexia to reach their full potential. But you know, in everything, it's all about perspective, right? So if you look at a glass, you can say that it's half full or half empty. So likewise, for dyslexia, if you focus on the good of dyslexia, you will see the opportunities. But of course, if you only focus on the deficits, then you will see the limitations. So today, I just want to highlight the opportunities of dyslexia to you. Okay. Okay, so you might have heard this in the news. There's a lot of reports about, dyslexic entrepreneurs. And if you look at the statistics, I think in the UK, yeah, there is actually 40%. Within a group of entrepreneurs, there's a 40% chance that they are dyslexic. And in US, a similar study was done. Within a group of entrepreneurs, they found that 35% of them reported dyslexic symptoms. Okay, and then in Singapore, my colleague Deborah Hughes, she did a similar study. She found that about 26% of those that she interviewed in her sample, she got a sample of entrepreneurs, and 26% self-reported themselves as dyslexic. So you can see in a typical population, our dyslexic numbers are only 4%, right? So all these are elevated, like significantly elevated. So you can see that why is there a trend? Like, why are there more dyslexics among entrepreneurs than in the typical population? This quote might answer your question. Okay, I think it was reported in the Sunday Times, the UK Sunday Times. Okay, so it says most people who make 1 million have difficult childhoods or have been frustrated in a major way. And dyslexia might be one of the driving forces behind that. Okay, so it might have been a difficulty that forces the person to innovate and to do well. All right. Okay, so let's look at some case studies of successful dyslexics. Okay, at this point of time, you might wonder, so is entrepreneurship, given? Is it nature or is it nurture? So maybe you can find your answer through this case studies. Okay, Kelly Hoppen is a famous interior designer in London. Okay, and she's known for her simple, classic, elegant designs. Okay, and she says, I can walk into a blank room and visualize what it will be like with furniture in certain parts, changing the colors and picturing it complete. So she has actually very good visuospatial memory. She can hold the images in her head and then manipulate it all in her head, right? Okay, Richard Branson says, I seem to think in a different way from my classmates. I was very focused on trying to set up a business and create something. So you can see that he's very strategic, very creative, and of course, it's no surprise that he's a billionaire and the owner of Virgin Airlines, right? And of course, many other companies as well. Okay, so he's a businessman, Richard Branson. Okay, Pablo Picasso, he's an artist, and I paint objects as I think them, not as I see them. Okay, so I mean, you might have seen his art pieces. They are very like out of the box, very imaginative, very creative. Okay, and then there's Charles Schwab as well. Uh, I can see the end zone. He's a finance person, while others are thinking very serially, step by step. So he has a big picture ability. Okay, so all these individuals with dyslexia, they actually found their strengths, and they all have the strengths in different areas. Some are strong visual uh, thinkers, some are very creative, some are businessmen, some are problem solvers. Okay, but before you think that they are just lucky dyslexics who have been blessed with other strengths, I just want to highlight to you that these strengths are actually something that are developed, not given. So it's actually, if you read about their life stories, you will find that these strengths are something that they were forced to develop because they had no other way. They couldn't learn by the traditional way, by the traditional route, and so they had to innovate to find something that suits them, and they found it. Okay. Let's go to the next point, which is our dear Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. He is mildly dyslexic, as some of you, I think you all would have read it in the papers as well. He found out about his dyslexia when he was in his 60s, only because his daughter, Li Weiling, found out that she's dyslexic. So dyslexia runs in the family, and therefore she got her father tested as well. And that was how he found out about his dyslexia. But by the time he found out, I mean, he's already our prime minister. Okay, and this is what he said in an interview. So I went through life and I overcame it, being dyslexia. When I did a course on speed reading and I did not succeed, not because I was stupid, but because I usually have to run my eye back, make sure that I got the right word, and that slows me down. But because I read more slowly, I read only once and it sticks. So there are compensations. So you can see that his sharp mind, he remembers all that he reads. It was more than a trait that he was born with. It was a trait that was developed because of dyslexia. Because of dyslexia, he forces himself to read slowly. And because he reads slowly, he reads once and it sticks. Okay, all right. And another example here is from Kelly Hoppen. Okay, she was unable to read or spell, and she has a lot of scars from that period of her life. Okay, but she taught herself to get through it. So before you think that her visual spatial skills are God's gift to her, she actually taught herself to get through it. So what did she do? She actually practiced visualization, the strategy of visualization. She would use a story and imagine it in her head and then attach it to something else, okay, to help her memory, to help herself remember. And then she realized that this is a technique that is widely taught to dyslexics later on, many years down the road. Okay, so she discovered something that actually worked for her. And yeah, it worked very well for her, and it made her into the designer that she is today. All right. Okay, and our last example is David Boyce. He's a lawyer. He's a famous American lawyer. And like Kelly Hoppen, he couldn't rely on text to learn. So the only way to learn is really to listen. And the superb listening skill might not be something he would use if he wasn't struggling, but he was struggling with words. So he could only rely on listening, right? But in the end, this skill gave him an edge over the other lawyers and saw him through many high-profile court cases. Okay, so really, I think the dyslexic advantage that we saw may not be something that the child is born with. It's actually something that they have to do to develop it, and it is hard work. Okay, it will take many, many years of trying, failing, and trying again before they even find it. And the thing is, I think maintaining that growth mindset is very important because it sustains you through the many years of trying, and eventually it can give you that dyslexic advantage. Okay, so I just want to highlight the fixed mindset of dyslexia versus a growth mindset of dyslexia. I mean, we all know what the fixed mindset is, right? Like, I cannot do it. Like it's given. Like, you know, there's no way I can make it better. So a dyslexic child would say, I will always be slow. It's just too hard, and they avoid trying, and maybe they will say, let me wait for that, you know, that dyslexic strength to just appear, right? On the other hand, a child with a growth mindset would say, dyslexia doesn't limit my potential. It will be harder, but I'm ready to put in the effort. I will embrace the challenges that may come, and I will find alternative strategies to help myself learn. Okay, so that's really the growth mindset that we want to inculcate in our children. Okay, and parents and educators have a lot to do with the growth mindset. Okay, so these are the 4 things that you can actually practice to develop this growth mindset in the students. Okay, so I'll go through all 4. The first one is really to help them acquire an objective perception of dyslexia. So they will think like, you know, why me? Like, why am I different from the rest? I would just tell them that, you know, dyslexia is part of the typical variation in the population. You know, like the different creatures in the animal kingdom, like left-handers versus right-handers, having dyslexia is just part of this typical variation. And this variation is important to enable survival of the mankind, right? Dyslexia forces us to interpret the world differently, but this can be very precious because people with dyslexia can often identify solutions to problems that others might overlook. Yeah. Okay. So I think the first step is really to give them like if they are questioning, you know, like why me? Why am I different? Like I want to be the same. But I think we need to highlight that it just makes mankind better. So having dyslexics within us collectively make us, you know, a stronger population. Okay. And I think the next point is really I like to use these stories for my students as well as my own children. You can go to YouTube and you can just Google this potato, egg, or coffee. There are many YouTube videos on it, but I think it's really the point I want to drive across is I think you can't change the fact that you have dyslexia, but you can change your reaction towards it. So since you have it, then make the best out of it. Okay, so in the face of dyslexia, how will we behave? Like a potato, an egg, or a coffee bean? So these 3 objects, right, when you place them in hot boiling water, the seemingly hard potatoes, they turn very mushy, like how some of our students are. They feel defeated by dyslexia. And then for the eggs, okay, the fragile eggs actually harden in hot water, hot boiling water. Okay, and that's quite good, right? Like how some of our students continue to press on despite their dyslexia, not giving up. So that's not bad. Okay, but I think ultimately we want our students to be like a coffee bean, because coffee beans infuse the hot water with their aroma. Okay, so and really just like how hot water brings out the best in the beans, we want dyslexia to bring out the best in our students. Okay, so aspire to behave like a coffee bean when placed in boiling water. Okay, all right. So other than helping them acquire an objective perception of dyslexia, you can also provide examples of relevant success stories. The stories that I shared with you earlier, it can be it, but uh, okay, they are younger, right? So you must choose relatable examples as well. Okay, and you might want to choose like Richard Branson may not speak to them because like they don't really care about Virgin Airlines. I mean, it's not in their life or anything. So you might want to choose like relevant examples. Of course, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew is a good one. Sam Tan, one of our MPs, ex-MPs, is also a good one. He's also dyslexic. Yeah, but I think you have to go and find like younger celebrities who might speak more to our children. Okay, but whatever it is, give them examples of success stories, even your own example. If you didn't have it easy when you were growing up, maybe you may not be dyslexic, but it can be some other things, some other apparent disadvantage that you had. You manage to change it into an advantage. You can share it with the children as well. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And these are just some guidelines for you. I mean, if you want to share your own experiences with them. Okay. And I also I think I want to focus on the toolbox of strategies. So I just want to say that, it is actually very cruel if we keep asking them to try without giving them the tools that they actually need. And if we just tell them like, just think of it differently, just think of it positively. If you keep telling just them this, they are going to fall flat on their face because they're going to try and then fail and try and fail again. And they will feel very worn out and dejected, from all the difficulties and challenges that they will encounter. So giving them the right tools is actually very crucial to developing a growth mindset. Growth mindset is not just about words, like it's not just about changing your perspective. They actually need the hard skills to help them with this change of perspective. And that's where educators and parents can play an important role. Okay, yeah, and that's what the DES Academy commits ourselves to do as well. We equip practitioners and educators and parents with the right skills so that they in turn can impart these skills to dyslexics. And with these skills, they can maintain that growth mindset. Without these skills, it's actually very hard to maintain a growth mindset. You're just asking them to think positive. I mean, how many of us can just think positive overnight like that, right? Okay, so let's look at the tools. Okay. Okay, the most important tool is actually the Orton-Gillingham approach for struggling readers. And that is the basis of our intervention here at the DAS. The Orton-Gillingham approach to reading was developed by neuropsychiatrist Samuel Orton and an educator/psychologist, Anna Gillingham. Both of them came together and they developed this OG approach that is used very widely with dyslexics. Okay, and I think let's look at the approach and the principles, okay, that it actually conveys. Okay, so dyslexia is a difficulty with sound awareness, right? So our students they have very low sensitivity to language sounds. And what the OG approach does is that it heightens their sensitivity to language sounds. And it continues to teach reading and spelling through smaller skills involving these sounds and letters. Okay. And we also know that dyslexia has to do with poor retrieval of letter sound connections. They cannot they look at the letter A and then they cannot retrieve what's the sound of this letter. So the OG approach targets that by fostering recall through sequential and cumulative teaching. So we are very repetitive in our teaching. We build our skills over time. We don't just touch on one skill and then move on to another without any overlap. So what our educational therapists do is always to build the skill on previous skill. And there's a lot of repetition so the child doesn't forget. Okay, and we also relieve memory load by introducing consistent rules and patterns together so that the students learn like categories rather than, single rules, single patterns, and then it's all over the place. So we actually categorize them into like groups and concepts, and when we teach, it's together. So everything they remember less in that sense. Instead of remembering 10 sounds, they remember maybe only 4 groups of sounds, for example. So there's lesser to remember. Okay, and we also target dyslexics' weak auditory working memory. The program is actually simultaneously multisensory. So what it means is that it encourages multiple pathways for learning through sight, hearing, touch, and movement. So the logic is when one pathway fails to trigger the memory of the language sound, they can rely on the other pathways to trigger their memory. Just like how, when one MRT line fails, you can rely on the other MRT lines to get to your destination. That's the logic. Okay, so the Orton-Gillingham approach actually looks at the fundamental difficulties of dyslexics, and it teaches language in a way that is friendly for dyslexics. Okay, so other than the phonics approach, we also teach our students some smart strategies. They don't have to use phonics for every single thing. There are certain things that, it's too hard to use phonics. We tell them to use mnemonics. Okay, so for example, these are some a common list of words that they find difficult. Okay, whether, accommodate, whether it's 2 C's, 1 C's, or 1 M, they get very confused. So I tell them that this house must be big enough to accommodate 2 cows and 2 monkeys. And then, since then, they will not have any problem with spelling accommodate. Okay, or another one would be like, it's necessary to have 1 collar, 2 sleeves. Our secondary school students cannot remember 1C, 2S, or 2S, 1C, but I tell them to draw. Okay, so they draw a t-shirt. A t-shirt has 1 collar and 2 sleeves. So I tell them it's necessary for your t-shirt to have 1 collar and 2 sleeves. Okay, and because it's common sense, it helps them remember better. So what we do is we actually make memory work easier for them. We don't tell them to just memorize. We latch it onto their long-term memory, something that is a general knowledge that is already common sense to them. So it's lesser for them to remember. Okay, and then of course, finding small words in big words like rat in separate, bus in business, okay, and so forth. So they can even create their own. So after a while, previously my P5 students, they actually created their own mnemonic, which is there is a bra in the library. Okay, and since then they have not forgotten how to spell library. Okay, they used to spell it as how we say it in Singapore, which is library, Libry, right? But but it should be spelled as Libray. But after using the mnemonics, there is a bra in the library, and they created this on their own. They have never forgotten how to spell library. Okay, so I think eventually our aim is really to push them towards that direction where they become self-sufficient, they take ownership of their learning. Okay, and they invent new ways of learning, just like how all those successful dyslexics did. Okay. Okay, so some more mnemonics for you. You can just look through. You can go to this website too. I think they have some more. Or the most effective one is to get your students or your children to create their own, because then it will be personalized and it will be meaningful. Okay. Okay, and homophones as well. Some of them are very confused with homophones. So again, there are interesting ways to actually help yourself remember homophones, right? Like there is a year in here. You use your year to hear. Okay. So you want to attach meaning to it to help the child remember better. So like I eat meat, there is a EAT in meat. Yeah, and then the car is stationary. So car is spelled as AR, right? So the stationary car also has the word, the phonograms AR in it. Okay, and of course, Chinese characters as well. Chinese characters are it may be easier because they are very logographic. Okay, so they do represent certain characters in real life. Okay, and if you can find that link, it will make spelling, Chinese spelling, easier for the child. Okay, so these are just some examples. Okay, even for math, if the child is having difficulty memorizing the timetable, you can teach them this strategy using their hands. I don't think, I usually teach this in class, but it's a bit hard to teach it on a webinar because I cannot see your reaction. Okay, but if you want to learn this, we have a certificate in math, and we actually cover all the strategies for math, other than the rote learning, those that are typically taught in school. We do alternative strategies. So you can attend the math certificate if you wish to pick up all these different strategies. Okay. We also have strategies to develop executive functions, and I think it's actually important to teach our older students. When I say older, it's actually P5, P6 onwards. They should start to take control of their own learning, and at that age, right, it's so important because P6, they're taking their PSLE. They need to have healthy executive functions by then for them to be able to cope with a national exam. Okay, there are 10 executive function skills that we are talking about: working memory, organization and planning, metacognition, what else? Emotional control, inhibitory control, response inhibition, and time management and task initiation. We have 10 skills that we talk about for executive functions, but because this is just a short webinar, I'm going to talk about one very briefly: procrastination and task initiation. Our students, they struggle with this a lot. I mean, who likes to do work, right? And if work is hard, because dyslexics will find writing hard, or they will find generally academic work hard, they are going to procrastinate, and they will have problems with task initiation. What do we encourage these students to do? We get them to use timer. Time is a very abstract concept. So when things are abstract for our SEN students, they find it very hard. So to make them more aware that time is actually moving, I like to use the kitchen timer that has this ticking sound. The iPad timer doesn't work for me because it has no sound. I can see it becoming smaller, like that red circle reducing, but I cannot hear it. So when you're managing SEN students, if you can make it multi-sensory, that's the best, right? So they can see that the time is reducing, and if they can also hear that it's passing, it helps them become more aware of time. Okay, it creates a sense of urgency in them. Okay, and so I like to use the timer when I get my students or my own children to do tasks. like just set the timer by themselves, and it's that timer that shows you the red circle is reducing in size. That's a good timer, okay, and it must have sound. Okay, so get those timer for your students if you are supporting them. That's a necessity by classroom. Another one is the Pomodoro method. Using this timer, Pomodoro needs them to be a little bit more independent. It works with the secondary school kids very well. So they are more they're more responsible for their behavior, so they can actually monitor themselves. Pomodoro just means tomato in Italian, okay, and it's named after the Pomodoro timer, the tomato timer, because that's what they use. Okay, so if you search this method, it's just basically setting your timer to 25 minutes, doing your task, and then rewarding yourself with a break of 5 minutes once you're done with that 25 minutes. So it's like a reward system, a self-inflicted reward system. But it takes some self-control. And usually by set one, they will be able to monitor themselves quite well, even those with ADHD. Yeah, so we have tried with our students as well, okay, and it works. And after the fourth 25 minutes, they get to take a longer break, like maybe half an hour break. Okay, so the key is to just work in short spurts, take a break, work in short spurts, and take a break. Yeah, and if they cannot do 25 minutes, then you just reduce to 15 minutes, or sometimes for the younger ones, even 10 minutes will do. Yeah, and then you take a 5-minute break, 10 minutes, then 5 minutes. It's to create that pattern. Okay, and another effective way to develop, to help with procrastination is to get students to list their tasks down. Get them to estimate the time that they expect to finish the task. And then when they finish, get them to write down the real time that is taken. Many times they will realize that they have underestimated themselves. They think they will only take 5 minutes, but they actually took 1 hour. Okay, and this task can be just homework for the day. Okay, so that when the child comes home, the child has, maybe 3 pieces of homework. Get them to write it down and estimate in the next column, estimate the time they think they will take, and then eventually get them to write down the real time taken. So that discrepancy, that awareness of the discrepancy will create that sense of time awareness for them. Okay, and I also realized that, a problem with students is they procrastinate a lot because there is no real consequence. I just sleep later. Like, if I don't finish my homework, then I just sleep later, like, nothing to lose. Then, of course, when there's no consequences, they are not going to follow the time or, manage their time that well, right? So what we can do is to implement consequences for them. And that, of course, it needs the cooperation of the parents or maybe the class teacher. So if you don't finish your work by a certain time, you lose certain privilege. Maybe you lose your gaming time. Maybe you lose, it eats into your recess time. Something like that. All right. So there must be a consequence for that procrastination. Okay, and then finally, you might want to try temptation bundling. Even for yourself, you can actually try that, because temptation bundling is actually a trick. It's a psychological strategy to help yourself do something that you don't like. So, for example, I don't like to mark. Okay, so whenever I'm marking, we will order in bubble tea, right? So that changes my perception of marking. I'm trying to link it with something pleasurable. So temptation bundling works by linking something unpleasurable with something pleasurable. So it can be music and homework for children. Okay, and for me, it's marking and bubble tea. So you can actually use this to help yourself do things that you don't like as well. Okay, I think you already do it, but it's really doing it consciously and doing it, being aware of the benefits of this. Okay, so I just want to say that, so those are the tools that we want to give our kids not all the tools, but really just I could only cover that little tools with you. Okay, but if you want some more tools, you can come on to our certificates where we will cover it in depth. Okay, point A to point B, there is always a way to get there. Some ways will be longer than others, but I think we want to stress to our students that there is always a way, just as long as you don't give up, and through the journey you learn resilience, you learn to be resourceful, you learn grit, you learn gumption. Yeah, and these qualities will serve you for life, not just in school for now. It's not a temporary thing. Okay, so yeah, where were we? Okay, yeah. So I just at this point, if you are keen in the strategies, you might want to take note of 2 courses which are coming up in March. These courses are funded 70% by SSG, so you will want to take advantage of these courses and do it. These courses are also Skills Future eligible, which means that if you still have balance in your Skills Future credits, you can use it to offset the 30%. So in the end, you don't have to pay cash upfront for these courses. So do take advantage of these 2 courses that are coming up. Basics of Literacy Support, which covers the Orton-Gillingham approach, and the Executive Function Skills, which covers the 10 executive functions that are so important for optimal functioning. Okay, so yeah, so just take note of these 2 upcoming courses, and you can go to our website to register. They will link you directly to Social Service Institute website and then all the connection will be made with your SingPass and all. Okay, so you can try, and if you have difficulty, you can give us a call and we'll help you. So I think the last point is I just want to say that, so we have given our students the soft skills, we have given them the hard skills, but we also need to be mindful of the frustrations that they will face along the way. So really their frustrations are really real. I mean, I have seen 2 kids through the PSLE system, and I know firsthand how painful it is to have children with SEN who are sitting for the national exams. Of course, you will have to work hand in hand with the school to ensure that they get the full suite of accommodations that they should get. Okay, but other than that, I think we also need to be very careful about their emotional health. Okay, so really we need to take a special role in cushioning their frustration. Okay, so I think they have heard a lot of criticisms from people, and it's always, even if it's not criticisms, it's bad reports from school, like the grades are not that good and all in comparison to others. So I think we need to be very specific and descriptive when praising them. We want to tell them exactly what is it that they have done well when they have done well. You can actually say things like, you stayed focused in finishing your work before you went to play video games, okay? Or you stuck with the problem until you solved it. So you can say that I see persistence, so you describe the qualities that you see. And in the next slide, there's a whole suite of adjectives and qualities that you can think about. Okay, so I think for every little action that they do, you might want to link it to a value or a virtue that you and your husband subscribe to. Okay, and I think that would encourage them and help the kids to see the values that are important to my parents. Okay, so again, we say always look for little changes and success. Sometimes it's very hard to see. Okay, but when there is very little to praise, you might want to be a little bit more creative about it. So for example, maybe the scenario is they complain, there's so much homework to do, I cannot finish it and all. When they're complaining, you need some wisdom and effort to search for the positive. So you might want to reframe it in a different way. You can say, let's see, there are 10 problem sums for homework that can be quite challenging to complete. but I see that you have already figured out, I see that you have already figured out how to do the first one. Looks like you are on your way. And yeah, so it's just us being a little bit more creative. It's more effortful, but you will get the hang of it as you practice this. Okay, so yeah, it's really being their cheerleaders, being beside them when they cry, give them the tissue, and when they fall, give them the band-aid. Yeah, so that's really our role, I think. Okay, yeah, these are the values that you can look at for inspiration. Okay, and I just want to end with this one. We might be very tempted to say you're such a forgetful child, you're so disorganized. We equate the symptoms of dyslexia with the child's personality traits. And that's what we want to avoid. As parents and as educators, I think we shouldn't label the child. So let's remind ourselves that, they are disorganized only in that situation, but let's not call them a disorganized child. So it takes a mindset shift for parents and for educators. Okay, so as long as we approach this carefully, I think we can be their cheerleader. Okay, so I just want to end with this. At the end of the day, we hope that we will raise children who can say I am who I am, not despite of dyslexia, but because of dyslexia. So they are actually embracing their dyslexia. They saw how dyslexia has helped them and developed them. And that's what we want out of our students. Okay, so yeah, with this, I would like to end this webinar, but I will want to open the time for some Q&A as well. Okay, and yeah, I mean, for those of you who need to go and cannot stay for Q&A, I would really appreciate if you can just scan the QR code to give us your feedback so that we can make these sessions more relevant for you all. Okay, yeah, and thank you for attending. So I will open the time for Q&A right now. You can talk or you can chat.
Okay, yeah, there are some questions on the Q&A. Perhaps you would like to answer them live.
Okay, can.
There's a question from Gloria.
Okay.
My son has slower auditory processing. Is this a form of dyslexia or ADHD?
Okay, so I think this is a difficult question because both have implications on auditory processing. So I think when we say slower auditory processing, auditory processing has different forms. So I think it has the phonological awareness part. It also has the phonological memory, and it also has the rapid naming portion. So I think we need to actually look at the psychological report to actually see which are the exact, deficits in auditory processing. But I must say that with dyslexia, the relation between auditory processing and dyslexia is the sound part. So dyslexics they just have weaker sound awareness, right? Sound awareness of the English language. Okay, but for ADHD, the inattention actually can affect the auditory memory. So it's very hard to tell. And I would say that both have a part to play in auditory processing. But I think for us, for parents and educators, what we can do is actually to give them the strategies. So while we understand, where it can come from, I think that understanding is important. But what's important is also the intervention. So if the child has slower processing and he also has attentional difficulties, how should I teach him such that his attentional difficulties will not affect his progress? So I think that's what a teacher and a parent has to answer. Yeah, and so if a child with attentional issues has auditory processing difficulties as well, I will use more visual inputs, visual images. I will get the child to move. I will not just, make the child sit and give me answers, because I need to get the child more active. I need to engage the child. So this is what I think parents need to think about. Yeah. Okay. Gloria, let me know if you have further questions, okay? Now, I think there's one question. If teachers do not think that the child does not have dyslexia but has other learning difficulties, what can be done for these children? Um, I think first of all, you might want to, if it's severe enough, you might, if you're a SEN officer, you might want to flag it up to your colleagues, to observe. Or if you're a teacher, you can flag it up to SEN officers who can to collectively observe with you for a period of time. So it's really to get colleagues to observe together with you. And then after that, if the case is strong enough, to bring it up to the educational psychologists in school, where they can push for more thorough assessment. Sometimes if the wait list is too long, I think they might also refer out to places like DAS. Yeah, and then we can do the assessment. But in the meantime, before the child gets assessed, you might also want to read up on Universal Design for Learning. It's a set of guidelines that helps educators to teach in a barrier-free way. It helps you to be aware of your own teaching, such that your instructions doesn't create inadvertent barriers for your learners. Yeah, so the Universal Design for Learning is a good set of guidelines for educators who would like to be as inclusive as possible in your own teaching. Yeah, so until the child gets diagnosed, then, I mean, that is what you will do in a general classroom. Then once the child gets diagnosed, then he or she should get the specialist help that is needed. Okay. Yeah, I hope I understand. I answered your question. So I think there's one interesting question here. Since dyslexics are good at listening, okay, I think some dyslexics are good at listening. Can they leave the TV on and do their written work? Okay, this is subjective. It works for me. So I do temptation bundling sometimes when I have to work at home on a weekend and I really don't feel like working, but I have to work. I will actually make my work a little bit more pleasurable by keeping the TV on. That's because I can stop myself from being distracted by the TV. So the TV becomes just some noise and some background noise and visuals to just keep me going. So whenever I look up, maybe there's something interesting to see for a few seconds, and then I'll go back to my work. It doesn't distract me. But I cannot say the same if it's a child. So you need to find, if you want to use temptation bundling, you need to find something that will not overtake the main task. Okay, so if the child is doing music and homework, make sure that the child doesn't spend too long looking for that music list or compiling that music list such that they get distracted by it and they forget their homework. And that was what happened to my son. Okay, so you must be sharp enough to notice all this. Yeah, so I told him that you can only use it if you know how to use it. Yeah, so after he plays his music, I will ask him to put his phone like far away from him, where he has to walk there to get it, so he doesn't get distracted by it. So the execution part is also important. Okay, so I hope that helps you.
There's an interesting question that just came up
Right.
from one of our participants. So he says he has dyslexia and undiagnosed ADHD. Would you like to answer?
Okay, by Chris, right? Okay, so I will answer Chris's question. He always finds it difficult to hear auditory and process the information, and more importantly, retain the information. due to a lacking concentration. Okay, so when it comes to home, instructions are often forgotten. Are there things that I could implement? Yeah, okay. So I think it sounds like executive function difficulties here. Okay, okay, so I think there are two issues here, like auditory, how to remember auditory information. For one, I would say writing it down. So I force myself to write notes during meetings because I don't think I also have a very good auditory working memory. So I force myself to write notes, but the notes actually help me to be sharper and it helps me to focus. So that is my strategy. So I think it works and that is possible because I'm in a meeting. But if you're talking about daily life and you're moving and on the go and all, maybe writing quick notes in your handphone can help. Okay, so you might have to play around with the strategies to find the ideal one. When it comes to home life, I think the instructions and the rules to use of things. Okay, I don't really get that, but I'm just going to try to answer. Or Chris, if you would like to correct me, you can just interrupt. Okay. I think at home, okay, I actually have a bit of difficulty because I don't really understand this part of it. I often forget rules, instructions, and choirs to use of things. Okay, maybe Chris is talking about a checklist of things to do and forgetting about the checklist and all. I think it's actually helpful if you can put the reminders in your kitchen or in your house. A principle that I would recommend here for executive function is we always tell our students to, no, we always tell our teachers to work from outside in. So if we hope to work on an executive function, we don't expect the child to change. We change the environment for the child in the hope of making the child change eventually. But the starting point should be always making changes to the working or learning environment. So if you're forgetting things at home, I would advise you to put up lists in your house where it's visually visible and you cannot miss it. So for example, if you keep forgetting to bring your keys with you, you might want to put keys, wallet, phone, these three items, put a symbol or a sign on your front door. Before you leave the house, always check these three objects. So yeah, so it's really making changes to your physical environment to help yourself remember. If these three things are the things that you always forget, then always put them at a place once you reach home, always put them at a place where they are always together. So whenever you leave the house, you just go to that cabinet and take all three. So it's really about making that physical changes before that internal changes can occur. Yeah, I think that's a principle that I might, want to leave you with. I think it's a very helpful principle. Yeah, for life or for work. Okay. So anyway, yeah, our team is always here. So if you would like to check in with any of us, you know where to find us. Our emails are on the website and you can call in as well. All right. So, and we'll be very happy to help you with your questions. Okay. And do think about the T&M courses, the courses that are 70% funded, because I think the first two courses that are running addresses many of the content that I have shared today. Okay, so with that, I thank you so much for spending your lunch time with me, and I hope you get you still get some time to eat. Okay, and we will see you next month in our next webinar. Oh, where my colleague will do, I think she will, the topic is actually this organizing a disorganized child. So yeah, it might be of interest to some of you. Okay, so look out for our mailers. All right. Thank you.